Excellent. And then the Citizens Academy started this past Wednesday. Many thanks for those of you who were able to attend in person. I understand that Chief Jones was there, and it was an excellent opportunity for all of you to speak with him. I was not in attendance, and I know that for a number of us, we are planning to attend asynchronously. Carlos, is the recording available on the Microsoft Teams?
So the Citizen Academy is now being done through Zoom because of some changes in IT security protocols. So Captain Kokinos reached out to me today. He did record the meeting, but it only recorded half, like the first half where Chief Jones was talking, and not the second half. He is working to download that so he can share it with me, and then I will share it with the pack. So as soon as I have it, I will distribute it to everyone.
Perfect. Really appreciate that. Next item we have is the county and the Reimagining Public Safety Task Force have fielded a survey. And thank you so much to Eric for sharing some thoughts on the survey over email. I just want to take a moment to see if anyone else has any thoughts or comments on the survey. I imagine it'll provide a lot of useful information for the county and for our work.
Yeah, Robin here. Yes, I agreed with everything Eric said. It's really a very poorly designed survey. And it's somewhat worrying that is the first effort from the new consultant. It's really, you know, it looked like it was 10 minutes work is what it looked like. So anyway, and a big opportunity missed. I mean, it's one of the things that I have thought we would get to at some point during this year is the notion that every modern organization that has customer-facing functions spends time and energy figuring out what their customers think of them. And it's absolutely incumbent on the police department to do that, at least annually, and possibly in real time on a regular basis. And this was a very poor start.
Thank you so much, Robin. I am noting Susan's comment in the chat that the new survey might not have had input from the consultant that's been hired by the task force, but the concerns about the survey remain nonetheless. Eric, I'm wondering if you want to share a brief summary of your comments, and if you're okay with it, maybe we can also enter the comments into the chat and make sure they're included in the minutes.
So certainly I'd be happy to cut and paste my comments into the chat. The first 37 questions are...
Excuse me, Eric, do you want me to copy and paste it now so that way folks have your comments as you're providing your summary?
Dalvin, thank you very much. That that would be very kind. Thank you. The first 37 questions attempt to sort of ask people what is your opinion of the responsibility of the police department to deal with a variety of problems. And it's arranged instead of in terms of priority or in terms of any kind of coherent subject matter, it's arranged in a kind of random alphabetical order, so that as you're confronting the questions, you're not in any way thinking systemically. The questions are, so for example, a word is thrown out, addiction. Now, so, is the police department supposed to stop addiction, cure addiction, investigate addiction? I mean, it's absurd. The consequences of addiction. So that instead of sort of saying you know, I mean, you could say that while many substances that people are addicted to remain illegal, does the police department have a responsibility for trying to control the supply? Should it, or I mean, that could be a question, you know, or you could, I mean, so it's a hodgepodge of random thoughts, and then it says, well, should the responsibility be shared by other agencies without specifying who or in what way that sharing might be, or what those other relevant agencies might be? Then the subsequent questions take some of the focus areas that the Reimagining Public Safety Task Force has identified and just sort of said, what are your thoughts about this? And again, these are not the kinds of questions you would ask the general public. What do you think about, do you feel safe? Are you concerned about crime in your neighborhood? Are you treated respectfully by the police? Do you feel that your interactions with the police are safe, or safe for your children? I mean, so that the kinds of questions that you would think that members of the general public might have, and that you would want to understand the public thinks about the relationship for the police. These are structured in these very narrow, tell us about the budget or structure. I mean, well, you know, it was a very poorly designed survey for trying to get the public to give some meaningful information. Statistically, it's, you know, whatever numbers come out of it are, you know, will be useless. Whether, you know, 1 out of 100 say this or 5 out of 100. I mean, these are not numbers that sort of yield any kind of meaningful analysis.
I'd just add one other thing to that, which is we have no sense of who the population is, which populations are responding, and how representative. I mean, the problem of survey bias is an enormous problem in every survey. I do surveys professionally from time to time, and it's really, really difficult to solve it unless you take a census of everybody in a population. You have to be so careful to figure out how your sample matches the population that you're trying to survey. So if you randomly walk down the street and ask people questions, I'm fairly sure that you're going to get different answers in Potomac and downtown Silver Spring. And unless you figure out how to make sure that all the populations are represented, including those who don't have internet access, then you really don't have anything that's of any use at all. So Eric,
Ms. Fredrickson, you had a comment as well.
Yes, no, thanks, Chair, our chairperson. Thank you very much. I mean, I agree with Robin and Eric's comments. I guess what I'd like to do is because we don't have all that much time tonight and we have a lot to cover, is to say what can we do about this? I mean, I know it's great to to have a kind of a commentary and think about a better survey that might be, but do we have an ability to do that? Is there a way to modify this? So I just like to say, I think it's a great critique. It's really worthwhile. But if we can't make a difference, and the survey's already out, then maybe we should move on or think about what other avenues there are for us to get community input, so that we can actually have a constructive outcome to this discussion.
Certainly, and we'll have some time later on in this meeting to discuss exactly how we can get public input. I just want to know that the survey, I believe, closes this Friday. I could be. Thank you, Delvin, for confirming. So, for better or worse, it's towards the end of it being fielded. We can make sure that some of the views expressed at this meeting are passed on to folks who are working on analyzing the survey, and hopefully, at least, it can help frame the results that they have coming in. We'll move on, but if folks have additional thoughts, please do add them in the chat. Speaking of the Reimagining Public Safety Task Force, I just want to make 2 quick notes. One is that their public forum is tentatively scheduled for December 3rd, which is the date we had been looking at. So I would advise that we allow them to take that date and we think of next year just to give us some more time to plan. And secondly is that the county's Chief Equity Officer, Tiffany Ward, briefed the task force earlier this evening, and the recording may be made available. Carlos, if you could look into that as well and see if we can have the recording available to us when that's available, that would be excellent.
Good.
And with that, we'll move into our first sort of substantive agenda item, which is the response from the Montgomery County Police Department to our data request.
Yeah.
I don't know if folks have had a chance to look at it yet, but it included a partial response to our request. Chief Jones noted that this request ended up being, a lot more complex once they started looking into the various databases that the department uses and all the different dictionaries and fields available. Some of these are provided by vendors, so there might be fields that are not used by in Montgomery County, even though it might be used elsewhere. So there are a number of caveats. I'd like to invite all of the commissioners to take some time to look into the responses and see if there's any particular fields we'd want to look into in more detail, particularly as it relates to the various subcommittees. And I'd love some responses to that if folks have them some thoughts on that if folks have them now. The other piece I want to mention and would love thoughts on that as well is Chief Jones noted that the response, initial response to our query was provided within 30 days, saying that that they were working on getting us the information we requested. And I know in a previous meeting, we had a slightly different interpretation of the statute that the data we request must be provided in 30 days, as opposed to the request being acknowledged and there being a response from the police department. So I just wanted to make a note of those different interpretations.
I guess I'll raise my hand.
Go for it. Yeah.
I have looked through the data dictionaries. They seem to be pretty comprehensive, and I think that they will provide all of us with a base for getting useful data out of the police department. That you can see from the way that they presented the data which kinds of data they do collect or are supposed to be collecting, and we can hone in on the particular fields and questions in specific databases based on what they gave us. So I was pretty happy with what we got. I thought for an initial fishing expedition, it was excellent. We landed a medium-sized whale, and there's plenty to digest there, but the police were responsive and they did give us effectively, so far as I can figure out, everything that we really needed. I take your point, Madam Chair, and maybe we can send them a polite note back thanking them profusely for the data that they provided and noting that we still expect it within 30 days next time. I mean, they did a pretty good job. It looks as though it was collected from a bunch of different places. So I think, all in all, that wasn't bad.
Certainly. I think the piece that definitely stood out to me, and apologize for not mentioning this earlier, is they are understaffed during COVID times. And I can imagine that this pandemic just throwing a lot of things out of whack, if you'll pardon the informality there, given that the statute was drafted prior to us being in pandemic time. So I think that certainly bears a little bit of patience on our end. But I'm happy to hear that your initial review was positive for that. Does anyone else have thoughts on the responses we received? And if not, we can move on to the next agenda item. Perfect. So we have split into our 4 subcommittees, and that's one way we can get our work started. Just as a reminder, emails between members of the subcommittees can remain private since there's no quorum, and all subcommittee recommendations are deliberated by all of us before we make any decisions. Each subcommittee can decide if you want a chair or facilitator or any other type of structure. That's not required. It's really up to you. We ask that you decide on a set meeting time for every month, at least for now, until we figure out what regularity works, and post a meeting link and meeting minutes for the public. And the meeting minutes don't need to be quite as detailed as the ones for the regular full commission. And with that, we can just sort of go down the line and get feedback from each of the subcommittees. And let's start with school resource officers. Dalvin, do you have anything you'd like to share from your subcommittee?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Happy Monday, guys. It's nice to see all of you. So we are set to meet with Young People for Progress next Tuesday, the 17th. We were supposed to meet with them last week at 4, but it seems like wires got crossed, so we missed each other. And so we're set to meet with them next Tuesday at 6, just to hear directly from them in terms of, one, now that we know that council members Joando and Reamer are going to introduce a bill to remove SROs and an accompanying appropriations bill to use the $3 million to go towards things in schools. We want to hear directly from the students that have been advocating for that in terms of just what it is that they would like to do with that, what ideally they would like to do with that money, how would they like to use our help in order to maybe leverage some of the changes that they are looking for. Jerome has been connecting with his own students, because I think something that we noticed even in conversations that we had with YPP, for example, is that while they are a robust student-led organization and youth-led organization, there are still some students that either because of job schedules or because of other responsibilities aren't maybe a part of those student-led organizations. So Jerome is working on tapping into those students that don't necessarily have not connected to those organizations. And lastly, we have decided to appoint a chair. Our chair is Jasmine Williams, and we think that's something that we're really excited about because of her experience very recently, much more recent than Jerome and I with CPS as students. But it also allows us to continue to build that capacity forward and allows her to bring a lot of the youth voice into this work that we're doing. So we're very happy to do that and work with her.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Ms. Williams or Mr. Price, do you have anything you'd like to add?
No, I think Dalvin covered what we needed to cover in regards to the work that we're doing. Very excited. Congratulations, Jasmine. But I'm interested to see, as the information's coming in from my students, just gaining insight into their realities as students, particularly RN because it's such a diverse community, but even tapping into their friends who are in other schools outside of the RM cluster. It's something that we've been noticing as I've been taking some data, is that the experiences for students in SROs are different when you look at the changes demographically at schools. So schools that have higher African American Latino populations tend to have more interactions with SROs, opposed to schools that have less interaction, usually more white and Asian students. And so Richard Montgomery is an interesting, because we're kind of right in the middle, but I'm interested to see how this plays out and what students come up with. And so more information to come.
Certainly. Ms. Lynn, you had a comment or a question.
Yeah, I just wanted to call attention. I just sent an email about a half hour ago. If we're going to be moving money around from an SRO to a counseling capacity or into a school psychologist area, another committee that I sit on, a statewide committee, had some stats today from MSDE about what the recommended number of students per school psychologist and per school counselor is nationally, what Maryland has, and how we stack up. So just know it is a statewide number, but I think it's a pretty good benchmark for going forward if we are going to be looking at moving money into those positions. So
Yeah, and I will say thank you, Jen, because we saw it before we came on, and so we're gonna and that was really enlightening because then now we'll share it with the students that we're gonna meet with, just to see like if that's kind of in line with what they were thinking and just if there were maybe some ideas that they were thinking that we haven't thought of, and I think that'll be a good way to marry the two things.
Yeah, I mean, especially the school psychologist number had changed July 1st. It was a huge number. It was over 1,000 students, or 1,000 students to one, and it just changed in July, July. So it's interesting. The gap is much bigger.
Thanks, everyone. Seeing as there are no other hands raised, we can move on to the next subcommittee, which is emergency response. We have not met yet. That's Ms. Lynn, myself, and Mr. Ricks. And Jen, if you'd like to provide the brief update that you had.
Yeah, I just, first apologies. I've been out of commission a week or so, a death in the family. So I just am kind of coming back up for air right now. And I'm thinking I just kind of want to hear I'm attending the police training, the Citizens Academy every week. And when we had the ECC group on to talk, there's some really interesting points. And I just kind of want to get some percentages and some feel for the people that are actually answering the calls and what they foresee as being helpful. I mean, I know I've been on a lot of calls where the chief has been on and he, 45%, I think was the percentage referenced of calls that come in are mental health related. So I'm very happy for, the money being, moved into the extra social workers. Now we just kind of need to see if those two things marry together and to what degree and what the real need is. I mean, I have my own ideas, but I don't really want to just be guessing at this. So I'm trying to set up a meeting. I'll email, I'm losing his name. Carlos sent it to me today. It's a really cool name though.
Davis.
Yes, that's it.
Yeah,
I'll message him and copy the group and see if he has time to get on a meeting with us. And then I guess we just need to organize and see how frequently we want to meet. And I'm not sure if Vernon is here tonight anyway. So I'll do that. I apologize for being a little delayed.
No worries at all. And I want to take accountability for that as well on my part. I do believe Mr. Ricks is on. Mr. Ricks, if you have any thoughts to add.
Good.
Yeah, I'm on. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Do you have any thoughts you want to add?
No, I'm okay with what you said. Thank you.
Perfect. I see we have a question from Mr. Sterling. I believe you're muted. Sorry.
Madam Chair, I had posted in our PAC files a recent paper called Alternative 911 from the Center for American Progress and the Law Enforcement Action Partnership, which looked at sort of 911 calls and might be useful for your subcommittee.
Oh, thanks.
Thank you so much. And I will go ahead and enter one resource into chat. And Carlos, if you can just make sure that's in the notes. This is from a group of disability justice activists who are looking at some mental health interventions which might end up having some of the same dynamics as incarceration, and how we can look out for that and make sure we don't end up, creating jail-like systems in mental health institutions. Great, and then we can move on to the, sorry, Ms. Lynn, please go on.
Yeah, just one more thing. I know Dr. Robin had sent me something very early on. I'm sorry, it's down about 10,000 in my email list of another state that has a great program, and he told me to check it out, and it's gone out of my head, Dr. Gaster. Was it Oregon or Washington? And it was a funny name.
It's the Coots program. Well, I can't remember. It's in Eugene, Oregon, and they've been doing this, sharing responsibility between COOT, which seems to be a network of social work providers of different kinds, mental health providers, and the police department there. They've been doing this for 20 years, so it's not new, and it seems as though it's been very, very successful. So that's all I know. I just heard.
Perfect. That's it. I couldn't think of the name. Thank you.
Okay. All right.
Perfect. And then the next subcommittee we have is discretionary policing. Ms. Branson's not with us, and Justice isn't as well. So, Dr. Gaster, you're it.
Okay, I'm it. Well, we did have a virtual meeting, and we decided that we would start with traffic stops. There's a lot of different discretionary policing issues that probably we'll end up dealing with, but we thought we would start with one of the most visible. And then we developed a document, basically, which I've just posted into the chat. It's also in the, I think Carlos has it and can share it directly. We felt that it's important that the police department explain what it's doing, and what it thinks it's doing, and why it's doing it, and at least to know what they think the rules of the road are, so to speak. You know, there are some things in there that I think are important and are probably not in their canned presentation, such as, you know, what incentives influence officer activities. You know, do they get bonus points for stopping people? And I think there is a deep question about what is traffic policing for, and what is, you know, we had a long conversation about the relationship between where traffic stops take place and where accidents occur. And I haven't seen anything from the police department which at any time which explains that relationship. It seems to me that we should be pushing them to do that. So there's this information request is sitting there. It's been around the three of us, but we believe that it would be better if this came from the commission as a whole rather than just from us. So it's here. I don't know what procedure we would want to, I mean, it's not very long. It's only a page. And people can probably read it as we go. Maybe perhaps what we can do is leave it in the chat and come back to it at the end of this section and see if people are prepared to push it forward, or if they have ideas. I mean, we're very open to ideas. We may well have missed stuff, or it may not be clear in some places. So, you know, please feel free. But does that seem like a good way to go?
Certainly. And the other thing we can always do is make this one of the items to vote on for the Google Forms if we don't arrive at a consensus this evening, to make sure that it can go through prior to the next full meeting.
Sure.
So if either you or Carlos could just put that in the chat, that would be excellent.
Did I not do that? It's not.
I'm not seeing it.
Ah, okay. Well, let me just send it.
Okay. No worries.
I just didn't send it. Is it there now?
Yeah,
there it is. Okay.
Perfect. Any initial questions or comments for this subcommittee? And if not, we can move on to the last, but certainly not least, the Hiring and Discipline Subcommittee. Alicia, do you want to get us started off?
Sure. Thank you, Madam Chair, and hello to everyone. Good evening and happy post-election. Nadia has very graciously agreed to give a summary of the very hard work and intensive work, I must say, that we did in 2 meetings prior to meeting this evening. And all members of the subcommittee were present for the first meeting and the second meeting, all with the exception of one who was unable to make it due to a scheduling constraint, but we worked very hard. And I did have one question. We were not certain about the minutes, whether the minutes will in fact be posted, or I thought that the understanding was that they were to be posted on PATS.
That's correct.
Okay.
Yes, and you can make it a more abridged version. It doesn't have to be as detailed as the main commission minutes.
Gotcha. And yes, well, I certainly kind of overdid it, and modeling myself, of course, after Carlos's excellent, extremely detailed minutes. And I just thought that was terrific for transparency considerations. I mean, you cannot get any more transparent we pretty much came up with. But Nadia, are you there?
I am here.
Awesome.
So I'm going to try to make it brief. So a number of things. The main goal was to figure out what were the priorities that we're going to go after. So we decided that the priority is going to be kind of going after discipline first, starting with Leobor and really understanding what that means in our county and how, because we consistently hear, well, the state is doing something about it, the state is doing something about it, but rather figure out how this commission can in some sort of ways influence the process or how people are affected here in the county. We've also said, obviously, hiring practices are something that we want to follow up with, but kind of figuring out the discipline process, including the internal affairs process that the department has. So one of the barriers that has already been discussed here was access to data. I think now that we have a lot of data to kind of look at, it's going to take some time, not just to look at it, but to make sense of it, because numbers are one thing. And as we were talking through this time, we briefly discussed having folks like from FOP and internal affairs to come in and explain, just like what Dr. Robbins said, truly what they think it is that they're doing, so that we understand and kind of move from that point on. And so a lot of it has to do with, again, understanding Leobor and what it means to unions and how it's going to affect other people, because we understand the consequences of that. Something that we also talked about in terms of how discipline and hiring works is how the decision makers of that process are chosen. So obviously we have public servants, but we kind of discussed the economics of campaigns and how that is directly impacted once those folks are in power and they're making decisions. So I think now post-election, we've also mentioned that a lot of people are more aware to kind of look at a campaign finance and say, oh, well, you know, there are folks that are investing in this campaign and it's obviously for a reason, kind of making those connections. So from my understanding, as far as the considerations that we were very worried about when it comes to the data, and I think Eric said it best, is that there are around 270 allegations in 2019. And these are basically, there's a distinction that he was highlighted between intake investigations and formal investigations. But the part that was kind of that was huge for us is that 54 of the 70 investigations are still open. And that's just from 2019, and there isn't really a way to figure out where those places are. So even as we were thinking through how we would be able to make recommendations, is again inviting folks over and saying, what is it that you're actually doing without breaching any, you know, confidentiality that you might have, understanding the process truly, so that we're able to kind of address it. And then the other part about the data is that it was noted that there's a third party that compiles the data and puts it together for the county. So figuring a way where that data can also come to the commission, because if it is going to be public knowledge and public information, it doesn't necessarily matter how it gets to us, as long as it gets to us. I think that was it. Caroline brought up a lot of really important questions that we are thinking through as a subcommittee. Again, just around what the disciplinary process looks like, what reforms are we allowed to kind of propose, because again, we're well aware of our restraints, and then looking at the Montgomery County contract specifically, and how the chief of police is currently has the power, and what the new bill that we were asked to weigh in on is going to affect that as well. So we don't have an answer about the bill because I know we had a different deadline for that, which is fine, but we started talking about it. So again, a lot of things are up in there when it comes to hiring and discipline. So again, we just made our goals, and we, I think, have a good communication channel, so we're able to figure out when we're going to be meeting frequently.
Nadia, just to clarify, can you say the investigation stat one more time? That was great, but I'm trying to you spoke a little fast that I didn't catch that part.
and again, I mean, for everyone in the commission, let me know in the future. I speak like this in Spanish and in English, and
yes.
And it's like, wait, what? She just said
and as a Dominican, I usually can catch it really well, but that was the one time I was like, oh, that was a little too fast for me. Did you say 54 investigations and 7 or
54 of the 70 investigations
are still ongoing? Got it. Okay. Thank you.
And so, again, those numbers scared us. So we were just going to get some clarity on that. But please let me know if I'm missing something. Caroline, Eric, Alicia, please.
I just wanted to, did we mention the hearing board? We were interested in knowing what is the exact process for the civilians being members of the hearing board for the disciplinary. When the officer chooses an administrative hearing regarding complaints brought against him, there's provision for a civilian to be included. We wanted to know, well, how does that civilian go about getting training for that? Eric brought that up. And are they how do people have that information? Is this information available to the public such that they might know? And because I'm sure there's an interest there, and how might they participate in it? So we really super are interested in the hearing board that's provided for under LEOBOR. And, what are the mechanics involved in that? And again, as was pointed out already, as Nadia said, we would need someone to come in and, tell us, break it down for us. What does it look like? What does the hearing process look like?
And Kate, last call, I think Kate did a really brief breakdown. It was really fast, and I don't remember if it was last call or the call before that, but Kate had a really good breakdown as far as how the boards work. So I will likely be reaching out to you, Kate, so just heads up. And also reaching out again to FOP and Internal Affairs, again, figuring out what it is that you're doing on your end, because we're not going to assume, and then going from there.
And so if I could just jump in to say, and then thank you to my the subcommittee members who've done just a great job. I feel like we're digging into a very important topic. I also, know that there's a lot of great work that's been done outside of Montgomery County and outside of Maryland in terms of best practices in discipline. It's a kind of a fraught area, because I think, for those of us who believe in, are committed to the workers' rights, the very important interest in ensuring that collective bargaining and fair disciplinary procedures occur, balanced with with the understanding that police officers aren't school teachers. I mean, they carry guns, and their encounters with people are more likely to lead to people dying than other public employees. And so how do you kind of make sure that you're taking into account in a disciplinary proceeding things that are actually one kind of problem that lead to dangerous outcomes versus other kinds of problems, which are they didn't file their paperwork on time or do something like that. And so I think it's a complex issue. There are a lot of people who've been thinking about this, and I think we can draw on them, including people who really looked into the Baltimore and the Baltimore contract with the backdrop of LEOBOR. And the two things are integrated and lead to a very complicating situation. So anyway, we have a lot to do. I've offered this to Madam Chair that have had the good fortune to have met a lot of people who are experts, which I cannot claim to be in this field. And to the extent that we can bring them in and to converse with this committee, I'm happy to try and make some arrangements. But I do just want to say, I think it is really important area and very complicating, obviously, as I said before. And so it's going to be a process for us to sort of bring together some recommendations for the committee.
And then one overarching last consideration, we all understood that police officers are unlike any other public servant subject to a collective bargaining agreement. And given that, we had to be super sensitive and focused on, whatever things that we're considering and thinking of recommending has to keep that at the forefront of our thoughts. Yeah.
Certainly. Robin, I know you have your hand raised. I think you're muted.
Two quick points. First point, I did do an analysis of the data from IAD. I can't remember if I sent that to people. I'll send it to Carlos so that you can use it. I went through their database and compared it to the annual report they provide. And to be honest, their data is rubbish. I mean, it's terrible. You cannot figure out from the data that they provide what did they sustain it, did they not sustain it, if they did sustain it, what happened. So that's one point. They need help with their data. It's really poor. It doesn't answer the basic questions that IAD data should tell you, which is how many investigations were there, what happened to them, how many were sustained, for the ones that were sustained, what happened. And this does not, this is the second point, this does not require that we breach the confidentiality of individual officer records. This is aggregate data. This is anonymized data. It is not about officers. It's about understanding what happened collectively across the entire police department and to particular units and particular divisions. If we don't know that, then IAD is not doing its job. So my only point is we have that. I'm happy to share it. I've shared it already with the county executive and the chief of police and the head of IAD, none of whom responded in any way.
Yes, please share that.
Yeah. And actually, I'm going to sneak this in, even though it's not necessarily exactly on topic. Eric wrote a very interesting and useful letter to the chief of police a few weeks ago about marijuana stops and arrests. Eric, did you ever get a formal response? You're muted. You're muted.
What I wrote was a question for the president of Montgomery College, who was having a forum.
Oh, I heard it, and I heard the police chief's answer. But did you ever send it to him directly?
I did not. I didn't take what I had written and send that to Chief Marcus.
I would recommend that you do, because okay. I thought his answer was slippery at best.
I think if I made a Dr. Robbins point, I think when we talk about like a lot of the work that stands in front of us is to rebuild some trust, right, between the systems of policing and our communities, particularly communities of color, who continue to be, you know, just ravaged, right, by an unjust system of policing. And I think and that's actually part of the reason why I asked you, Nadia, to reshare the data, because if we can't trust that part of it, right, then how can we ask our communities to trust the system of policing in other ways, right? Like, how can we trust you to not pull us over if you're not doing that appropriately? How can we trust you to? So I think as we constantly say that, and this ties back into the survey initially, if we can't trust you to do a survey appropriately, then how do we trust you to do the other stuff? And I think that's kind of what we're seeing a lot of as we're starting to do this work, is that there's a reason our communities don't trust police and the system of policing. And it comes down to those fundamental things you have to do up until, you know, the policing and following through and things like that. There's a lot of reasons. Then it's not just limited to just policing. It's those fundamental things too.
Ms. Sandy, I see your hand raised.
On the call, right?
Say it one more time. Sorry, Alicia.
Chief Jones is in the meeting this evening, isn't he? Is he in the meeting?
I believe Chief Jones might be. Let's just go to Nadia real quick, and then we'll see if Chief Jones wants to weigh in.
Yeah, I mean, you see me animated as hell, Becky. I'm so sorry about that. It's just, I think, and I was bringing up data because I wanted to make sure that someone else does say the fact that if you're given internal affairs data, you're purposely not giving us what we want. It is the basic information, right? Totals, breaking down totals. It's as simple as that. And I think, Davin, you know, I would push back about building trust is not even building trust. There was never trust there. Right. It's creating a sense of not even trust, creating a sense of safety to start with. Because at the end of the day, I think, and the reason why I get very passionate about this particular thing is because you can tell me to sit in a commission, you can give me the data, but if the data is not transparent and the data is doesn't have anything to do with what I'm looking for, then how am I going to serve the community that I'm here to serve, right? if all I have are my experiences and the experiences of my community, and you're asking me for numbers. So I think I just want to make it. It's not about the numbers, right? Again, I don't want it to say that it's about that, but just emphasizing on the fact that the reality that we have in front of us as a commission is to build the trust that never existed in this county, and it's unfortunate, but it's real.
Yeah. And if because you're spot on, because you're right, it's not building or rebuilding or anything like that. But the other point of it is, if we can't trust you to do your basic job, the basic part of it, right? Then how do we get to the point where folks are saying that we need to get to? And I think that's because all we have is our experiences, right? And if that's all we have, and they continue to confirm that there are discrepancies and there are issues and there's clearly inequity at play, right? Then how on earth do we get to the point where we constantly hear, oh, well, you have to get to this point, you have to get here? Yeah. So I hear you, and I'm with you 100%.
You can't build. I mean, I come from the construction laborers work, right? You need a foundation in order to build whatever it is that you're trying to get up there. Did Madam Chair drop?
Can I add one thing? Can I add one thing? So at the end of the training that I attended last week with, which was the training, this sort of special training for us, there was a long discussion about the failures of the police department to communicate with the rest of the county. And I think Jen has made this point many times, that there is a lot of activity in the police department that is simply below the radar. They have nobody to put it out there. They have no competence at putting it out there. And to me, it's not surprising that their IAD reports are rubbish, because they don't really have anybody who they have no professional outreach organization there. And I think one of the things that we could be thinking about as we go through here is, I mean, it is a delicate balance between offering the police a platform for propaganda, right? And for sort of pushing their point of view about how everything is rosy and it's all brilliant in the county, but also for giving the police the opportunity to explain what they are doing on a consistent basis, so that the county can, the citizens can have a discussion through us, perhaps, with the police department, where they're saying, look, this is what we're trying to do. And we can say, fine, well, we agree with that, but you're not doing it very well. Or we don't agree with that. We don't want to see that. We want to see something else. But at the moment, it's like having a conversation with a mute. I mean, this is somebody, this is, you know, an entity that does not know how to speak to the public.
Yeah, I think that's spot on. I think Madam Chair got kicked out, I think, right? Is that what happened, Carlos?
She's back.
Okay. Eric, you had a question. Go ahead.
It goes to the communications piece. At one of the Citizen Academy discussions, one of the presenters said to the audience that there is a war on the police in the United States, a war against the police. And I was struck by that comment in the context of the Citizen Academy. And the officer, spoke about how he wears, his soft body armor more often. That the problem of the lack of trust, that Nadia and Dalvin have expressed so clearly on one side, there is a problem on the other. And that it's alarming to me that the police feel that there is a war, that our police feel that there's a war against them. And so there's clearly there's a need for a much more sophisticated dialogue between the police and the community that they serve. If the police feel that they are the targets of a war, or that the public is at war with them, that leads them to behave in ways that can be ultimately very dangerous for everybody concerned, it seems to me.
Certainly, and I know Chief Jones has his hand raised, so I'd love to hear from him.
So good evening to everyone. To be honest with you all, this is a lot to really kind of take in, right? So a lot of what you all are throwing out there, and it's all in respect and understanding. But I think this commission, if I could just say this, there is a lot to learn about our police department based upon all of the conversations I've been hearing about the questions you all have been asking over the past 2 to 3 months. It is clear that many of you are not educated, and I get it, as Dr. Gasser stated, in some of the communication realms of how to communicate to the community in many different ways. We've been, there's a lot of factions of the police department, that does communicate with our community. It may not be one specific community. There's a vast majority of different communities in Montgomery County where we have well-established relationships, such as the African American Liaison Committee, the Latino Advisory Commission, that we meet with monthly. And we talk about issues within the African American community, the Latino community, and even beyond. And I just use those as 2 brief examples. But I think if I could just ask you all for a little patience, because I think at the end of the day, a lot of what I'm hearing and the questions that you have are great questions. And we have answers for those questions. But the opportunities for us to go before you, for example, this is the first time that I've really had any ability to have a discussion with you all about this, all in sort of general. And yes, I did the Citizens Academy last week for those of you who were there. But the reality is there's a lot more to share, and we are committed to sharing. We have bent over backwards, just like we did with the data request that you all had. I have, as Madam Chair has noted, in my letter when I stated to you all, we have a lot of requests, MPIA requests, that have come to our police department in the past 6 months.
Yeah.
Why? I guess because people are at home in COVID. They have an opportunity to do more than what they've ever done before. And the reality is that we've not even had the staff to be able to keep up with the requests.
Right.
And we understand that you all are a very important part of government based upon what the council and the county executive have put you all together for in your purpose. And we support that. But at the end of the day, there's got to be we've got to have an opportunity to sit on the other side of the table and have a conversation with all of them. And that's all I can ask. And you can call my data rubbish. You can call our systems systematically. You can abuse us whichever way you want. And this is the way, again, and your opinion is your opinion. I respect your opinion. I am not being disrespectful whatsoever. But the reality is that we know in the world of police reform right now, there is a lot of discussion. And Eric is right. Yeah, there's a lot of discussion going across the entire country. I talk to chiefs of police every day who are similarly going through the same things within their community. And policing is local, right? And we all have to figure out ways to develop positive relationships to have positive outcomes. And that's one of the things I'm committed to doing in this community. I've always been that way. And for those who know me, like the Vernon Ricks of the world, I didn't meet Vernon just when you all were put together. I met Vernon literally 30 years ago when I sat on a task force on mentoring task force as a board of director with Vernon. I've been working with Vernon in community, with students, with kids for a very long time. This is not new. And so with that being said, when we look at how we're trying to put together data, how we look at this, what is the process? And it's a great question Nadia has about our system, right? About cases that come forward. Some cases are externally that come from the community, but some cases come internally. Some of those cases that are internal affairs are actually complaints that come from within the police department. Another employee complains, an executive sees some action of wrongdoing. So there are things that or an employee did something off duty that, again, via our police rules, requires them to abide by all laws. And if they, for example, got arrested or did something wrong while off duty, that gets investigated internally as well. So there's, again, when I say this, and I say it with all due respect, we have a lot of information to share with all of you. I think it's going to take, the extra meetings, subcommittee meetings, to bring in my so-called subject matter experts to help explain to you all how our system is designed. What personnel do I have, as Dr. Gasser's talking about data? How many people do I have that works in that records management system, and how they put that data together for the outcomes or the output that we need to put for the public? So there's a lot of work that has to be done. I'm just give us the opportunity to educate. Then you can take the information based upon what we give you, which is what I would expect, and then for you all to be able to make those recommendations for policy changes and the like. And I'll stop there.
Thank you so much, Chief Jones. I just want to make a note that neither Chief Jones nor Ms. Brewer are sitting on any of the subcommittees, and that was a conscious decision that Dalbin and I made, because we imagine that their expertise will be called upon by all of the subcommittees. So as we do these updates and meetings going forward, I don't want to put them on the spot during a meeting because we have not shared any of these questions with them ahead of time. But if they have any immediate reflections or thoughts that they'd like to add, this is certainly a time for them to do just that. So I know there's a couple of hands raised, but I'd love to see if Ms. Brewer has any reflections on what's been shared by the subcommittees thus far. And maybe that'll answer some of the questions we have. Ms. Brewer, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can now.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of information that you guys have, and I'm encouraged as with the information that you were provided, that you guys are working to go through it. I mean, I understand that's going to take some time to go through it. I appreciate saying that you guys are going to reach out so that if there's policy questions or anything like that that you have, we can make sure that we get those answers, both myself and or Chief Jones, so that we can make sure we give you those answers so that you guys can move forward in the way that you feel necessary. But again, I am available if there's any questions or anything, please. I'm having some issues with my email. I realized that some of the emails that were being sent out were going to my junk email, so I'm slowly fixing that. So if that happens, maybe we'll figure out another way to reach out to me, but I'm trying to fix that with my email. But I will answer what I can if people have questions for me tonight. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Brewer. And then we have some questions. I'll just go in the order in which I saw them. Ms. Hudson.
Yes. Hi. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. And it's just a very brief comment. I just wanted to say that I very much enjoyed the Citizens Police Academy. I must say that, and I will say that off the bat. I thank you very much, Chief Jones and Captain Coquinos, who was not on the call. However, I very much appreciated the first session that we had, and I found it very informative. And Dr. Robin, if I recall, and quite a few other of us, did also comment on how useful and helpful it would be if the community saw what we were seeing. I think that was one of the overarching comments that threaded throughout. Wow, if we could get this out so that the community also could have access to what you are presenting to us, because we did not have much of that information, and it was quite helpful. And I thank you again for that first session. And I do know it is a long road and we have a lot of work to do. And Ms. Brewer, we will be calling on you, the hiring and discipline subcommittee. Thanks.
Certainly. Robin, you had your hand up next.
Sure. So Chief Jones, I don't know if you were in at the beginning of the meeting. I think your people did a bang-up job providing the data that we asked for. The original data request we put in, I thought they did a great job. They gave us exactly what we asked for, and I understand it takes time to do that. So we're grateful for that. or I'm grateful for that. And I think that there will be a lot of useful stuff to come out of that, because it helps us to understand what you track and what you don't track, or what maybe you don't track. Anyway, so that was one thing. On the IED data, I'm sorry if I spoke sharply, but I have talked to, I had a long meeting a year ago with then Lieutenant Koskinos about this, and explained exactly why the data doesn't provide what it should. And I think I'm not really complaining about what you got. I'm suggesting that maybe you need some help to get it right. It's the same story with outreach, with PR. You don't have the tools that you need to get your story out. And we may not agree with the whole story, but you should at least be able to tell the community what's going on. And you clearly, I mean, we looked at the numbers when we went through the budget during I think it was Captain Koskinos himself talking about the various divisions and whatnot in the police department. You don't have the personnel to do anything remotely like the communications that Montgomery County needs, and both the police department and the citizens deserve. So, that's where I'm coming from.
And I don't disagree with you at all, Dr. Gasson. I would say, we're in the police business, right? And we've not always been, the focus has not always been on always giving out data. When you look at policing across America. And I will tell you, I'm not a data guru. That is not something that I am trained. I am a police officer by trade. And that's where, when you look at many of the positions throughout our department, though we have approximately 700 professional staff, we have very few people who work in for example, our policy and planning, which is our strategic planning division that probably deals with more data than anybody else.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, this year I lost two of the best people, two of my most important people out of that division. One went to another county agency and the other retired. So we are, again, having to really kind of, I wouldn't call it starting at ground zero, but we've got to really get that back in motion in the midst of where we're going. And in response to the communication piece, I couldn't agree with you more. I actually have made a commitment in my communications world. I am actually hiring a civilian to lead up my public information office that has expertise in public information from a professional standpoint. That's not been the way that we have traditionally done it here in the county. But I am making those changes because I've seen that can be a better functionality served by others. So again, having a discussion, right? This is what I'm talking about, where we need to be able to share some of those things where we have this vision or where we are. And we know, for a matter of fact, there's information that could be better given to explain, what we do. But, again, there is going to have to be a commitment on behalf of the county, from a financial standpoint, that actually provides us with those, with the personnel that can give us those resources. And I would not object at all to this body making those recommendations that I would fully support in that regard.
Thank you, Chief Jones. I know Mr. Ricks has his hand up. Mr. Ricks, if you'd like to share.
Yes, can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can. Please go ahead.
I just like to say that thank you, Chief, for coming on and giving that conversation. I had said to this group early on in the beginning that I think that going through the Citizens Academy would give people a better understanding of what the real world is in policing, and not do what has been the mantle of the nation right now, is everybody jumping on one bandwagon without information. We know, and we've heard information across the country, that people hollering defund the police have made elections almost impossible for some people who have been great elected officials in our community. And those, a lot of times, people are not aware of what the real world is out there. Now, I know that the committee probably does not agree with me, but I think that in a lot of cases, some of the questions that we are asking would be answered if we had the right were able to get the information and not just jumping off running without some way of having the conversation. So that's me. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Ricks. And that was likely the perfect segue into our next section, which is public input on policing matters. I'm seeing a lot of questions in the chat about the police academy and the Citizens Academy. I want to make clear that this is open to all Montgomery County residents, and I'd direct you to the relevant departments of the police department to find out when the next one is scheduled. We as a commission have our own abridged version that the police department has been kind enough to prepare for us, which we just started last week. And our next agenda item is on public input on policing matters, specifically being aware that we have the survey that's already been fielded, and we've had some folks share some critiques of that survey, and that being a mechanism for people to give input. We also have public forums coming up at this point next year. And in the meantime, we are also limited in how much we can do. Once again, if you could just mute yourself if you're not speaking, I think we're hearing some noise there. Given that we're limited because of the pandemic, if there are ways we can engage online or even offline to get input from folks. I'd love to just open it up for ideas if people have specific thoughts, and then we can continue this conversation in subsequent meetings. Ms. Fredrickson, I see your hand.
Yeah, I guess I'm interested in knowing when the results from the survey will be back. I know we know it's going to close shortly, and even though it has been described as perhaps being inadequate, and there are other questions we would want to add to it, it would be helpful perhaps before we devise a subsequent process to see what the results are, and then maybe we can think about how to refine certain areas, and perhaps we can work with the task force to add a second set of questions or do something. Since they have a budget, perhaps they'd be willing to entertain us offering them some suggestions for a follow-up based on sort of further narrowing and refining the questions that they'd ask in light of the data that they get.
Certainly, yes. I know at a previous meeting we spoke about using social media engagement, using podcasts, maybe radio spots. So we thought about different ways to get information out there. That can also be a way to get people aware of the commission. But if folks have ideas on how we can hear from the community given these constraints, I mean, one thing could be as simple as adding an online comment form to our webpage. Just so folks who want to reach out to us at least have a formal mechanism for doing that.
I actually like that idea, adding the ability to submit questions on our website. I think that's a good way. And then what we can do is then we can compile the questions like either weekly or bi-weekly or something like that, and then just answer them that way. I think that could be a good way also to move as stuff is moving, right? So like say, for example, a council member introduces something or a delegate introduces something, and then we can ask folks like, what do they think or whatever, and then we can respond as we go, as opposed to kind of pigeonholing ourselves into one medium. So I like that idea.
Yeah, that's excellent.
And Ms. Lynn, you have something to add?
Yeah, not to totally repeat what was just said, but I was going to agree that's a great idea. But also, I don't even think people know we have a website. This goes to the whole conversation we're having here, that there is not enough of outgoing, good communication so the community knows. I think it's a very much of a us and them kind of thing. And I hear that from my police friends, and I hear that from my regular friends, right? So I think we just communication and equal communication and balanced is so important. And I can't even tell you what the website is, frankly. I can tell you off the top of my head. I think it's really important. We need to be pushing it out there, whether it is in social media, whether it's in a Facebook page, whether it's a tweet by the police, whatever. Before it's a great idea. We need to move on that. I would be glad to help with that because I don't know, I've got like 50 websites that I do. So just putting it out there, it's out there. Thank you.
Appreciate that. We'll certainly look into that. We'll take a comment from Robin in just a second. We also are in the new business section. So if folks have additional things they'd like to bring in that we haven't discussed so far, please feel free to add those in as well. Dr. Gaster.
Just to say to support what Jen just said, I do think a website and a web presence is probably the way we need to go. We had that discussion last time about social media and the pitfalls and traps of people speaking on behalf of the commission. Of deciding who gets to speak for the commission and when they get to speak and what they get to say on behalf of the commission. Social media is real time. And I think it's a dangerous place for us to get too far into. On the other hand, I think we're all agreed we need to be present in the community in ways that the community can find us. So I think Jen's point is really well taken, and the general point is well taken, but I still feel very cautious about social media, just to say.
If I may, Madam Chair, and Dr. Robin, I think you're spot on. I think that there's a line that we can toe with social media. And so, for example, Chief Jones, you had mentioned that there are things that not only we don't know, but that the public has also not been educated on, right? So is it a scenario where, say, and I'm just going to use you and I as an example, is it a scenario where you and I one day, like, I filter questions to you on, so I'm using this as an example. It doesn't have to be you. It could be an officer of yours or something like that, where I filter questions through social media to you that can be answered in real time from the public, right? Because I think also the other reality is that if we were not in the middle of a pandemic, right, we could, in theory, like, say Dr. Gaster, myself, Alicia, and Chief Jones could go out into a community together, right, and talk to some folks that way, right? Or Nadia, myself, and maybe Kate could go out and talk to some folks, right? But it just becomes harder to do in the middle of a pandemic where we're forced to do it virtually. But I think that there's a way for us to find that medium and really thread that needle where we're not veering into inviting trolls, for lack of a better word, right? But we are meeting people where they are right now, because I think as we get further and further, and we see that cases are rising, in the county and in the state. So this is one of those things that it could be going a little bit further. And I would hate to sit on our hands and say we can't reach them this way because we don't know how much longer we're even going to be doing things this way. So I think we can find that balance. I think that there's a good chance for us to be able to do that in a way that is both respectful and inclusive. I think that there's a way for us to do that.
Dalvin, if I could just add to that.
Yes, Chief.
And I would just say this, over the past 7 or 8 months, I feel like we've been doing a lot of this, right? I do at least 2 community meetings like this a week, on average. And I agree with you. It's a great way, even though we're in these times, but I can tell you, we've met with people we've not had discussions with before, and educating them about and answering their questions, and even if we do it on the 2-hour call, virtually, we're still answering their questions even afterwards. So that's what we do. That's part of an outreach program that I think that we're not at all. We would be in partnership with you to do that. I think it's important based upon the work that you all are doing. For us to be able to share in that and be able to answer the questions that the public may have. We got a large amount of staff that, is available to be able, and they're qualified to answer those questions just as much as I am. So yeah, so if that's the direction at some point that you all want to go, it's just a matter of putting those things together. We've got some other things that we'll be sharing with you all soon. One of the things my staff has put together is a really sort of a fact sheet, but it's more than one sheet. There's a lot of facts similar to what some of the stuff that Dr. Gasser was talking about earlier, to be able to try to educate the community a lot more, because we get asked a lot of the same questions over and over. And so what we've done is started to put together those most frequently asked questions, and we're going to spread that out amongst the community within the coming weeks here. It's in its final touches now. And once that's done, then that kind of gives people too, as well as you all, a baseline for some additional information that you may not have had before.
Thank you, Chief Jones. We'll take one more comment from Nadia, and then I just want to do a quick review of next steps.
So I think as far as including people, particularly the community, I think we had someone who was continuously sending messages, and thank you so much, because I think that's what holds us accountable. If there's a way to do, whenever it is that we're meeting, kind of separate a certain time where the public can comment. Perhaps they might not be able to get an answer during that time. I don't know if it could be, bi-monthly, whatever that may be, because to be honest with you, I like the fact that these meetings are recorded. I absolutely like it. And I think it needs to remain as record so that we're able to see where everyone's standing. And when we have community be part of that, then we hold ourselves accountable, because we have it's on record. This is something we hold ourselves accountable to. The other part of it is trying to reach people where they're at. Historically, this county hasn't been able to do that for 1,000 billion reasons, and that's just the reality. So if we're going to be going to where people are at, I think we have to make a really, really strong effort to have either, the police department, the FOP, folks who are on that side, kind of share what contacts you've been speaking with, and kind of share the people that you've been getting input from, so that we're not duplicating efforts. And two, we're able to identify if there is a discrepancy or there is a difference of people speaking to you as opposed to they're speaking to somebody else, because that's also a reality. So one, adding perhaps a portion to bi-monthly, where members of the community can come and speak and share their piece, but also being able to have the information that Chief Jones was just mentioning right now of the folks that they're meeting continuously.
Certainly. Thank you so much, Nadia. Just want to remind everyone to share your subcommittee meeting times and minutes with Carlos, so we can share those on our webpage. We'll be doing a little review of the webpage and soliciting input from all of you. I know it has short bios for each of us, so if there's any corrections to that, please feel free to send those in as well. But that's definitely something we'll be taking a little bit more seriously in the interest of outgoing communication. If we can just go through the subcommittees right now and see if you have a standing meeting, when your next one is. So the SRO subcommittee, do you have a standing meeting time?
Our next meeting is next Tuesday, the 17th as of right now, it's scheduled for 6, but that's tentative. We just need to make sure that that works for YPP. And we've been communicating via email. And so we usually take like Tuesdays and Thursdays and kind of just shoot off emails to each other, just because of our work schedules. That's easier for us. But if we settle on a standing meeting date, then we'll be sure to let Carlos know so he can post it.
Perfect. Thank you. I know that the Emergency Response Subcommittee does not have a standing meeting time, but Wednesday might be a day that works for most of us. Which one's next? Does the hiring and the Discretionary Policing Subcommittee have a standing meeting time?
No, we don't. And I kind of doubt that we will. I imagine we'll do most of our work. I would just remind you that we have that information request pending to be discussed at the end of this section.
Certainly. And lastly, the hiring and discipline.
Right, and neither do we. We don't have a standing date, and we are very diligent about. When we made sure that we were going to get back with each other after this meeting, sometime in the next day or so, and find out when our next meeting is going to be. I will be much more aggressive about getting those announcements out for meeting times for when we're going to meet, much more in advance than I had done. A little bit of fumbling around because of the election and all the other work constraints going on. But I wanted to say, have we thought of La Nación or El Tiempo Latino, or, posting information there regarding these meetings and, on radio station? Well, we didn't mention radio stations. There's a TV station as well.
Can I?
That's an excellent suggestion.
And not just the Hispanic community, the Spanish-speaking community, but also the Ethiopian community. We have a very, very large Amharic-speaking community.
Can I ask something here?
To get that out in newspapers.
We've had this conversation come up several times now, and it's obviously a central part of our mission to connect to the community. I think we might wish to revisit the subcommittee structure, and we might wish to think about having either a subcommittee or just Dalbin in charge of doing outreach. Leading the outreach effort, because it's clear that we need to do this, and all of us have our own responsibilities in this thing. So anyway, I just raised that.
Certainly appreciate that.
Part, I certainly put out the word that, hey, we're meeting. Could you please, to all my friends and so forth and colleagues. But, again, I know folks go to other, organizations. They're members of other organizations or clubs or just the gym, posting these things at the gym, at church, whatever, just to get the word out there. And these aren't very cost prohibitive. I mean, I wouldn't imagine that it would cost much at all to post notifications at the gym.
Certainly. And I think Dalbin and I have already started looking into this a little bit, so we can come with a bit more of a concrete plan. But I think just getting a sense of your feedback is very helpful as we put these plans together. The final piece was, does anyone have any objections to voting on the information request coming from Robin's subcommittee? And if there are no objections, is there a motion to put forward this information request?
First.
Second it.
Excellent. All those in favor of passing on this information request to the police department?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Any abstentions? Excellent. Carlos, do you have the vote?
I didn't hear any abstentions. I'm sorry, I was taking notes. Did anyone vote against the motion? No, I don't think so. So I think it carries unanimously.
Excellent. Thank you so much. So moved, and we'll be sending that information request to the police department. With that, we can call our meeting to a more timely close this evening. Thank you all so much. Looking forward to hearing from all of your subcommittee work. And thank you for all you're doing to make our county a better place. Have a good night.
Thank you. Good night, everybody.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night, everyone.
Right.
Thank you, Chief Jones.
You're welcome, and have a good night.
Yeah, you too.